Honourable Member for York West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very happy to be able to stand here and to speak briefly to Bill C-525. Just for the mover of the private members bill, I have to say, if he believes that this is so important and is worthwhile, then why doesn't the government introduce legislation to do what's clearly trying to be done through the back door? Because the government doesn't have the courage to take their actions and clearly stand up, introduce legislation if they want to see changes, then do it. Rather than previously we had 377, now we have 525. If you've got some concerns that you think changes need to happen, then do it the proper way and introduce legislation as a government. So I'm happy to have a chance to speak according to the government sponsors, which is to help empower workers. Specifically, Bill C-525 amends the Canada Labour Code, the Parliamentary Employment and Staff Relations Act, and the Public Service Labour Relations Act to provide that the certification and decertification of a bargaining agent under these acts must be achieved by secret ballot, vote-based majority. Well, you'll forgive my apprehension, but as this bill does come on the heels of the government's last union-busting bill, as I mentioned, 377, I have to wonder again about the real motivations behind it. Bill C-525 affects more than 1.2 million employees working as public servants or for an employer under federal jurisdiction. This includes everyone from my own staff to their own staff, to the local postmaster, to the teller at my local bank or credit union. This means that we need to make sure that we get this right, because the bill impacts on real people every day. The Conservatives have made it clear from the beginning of their term that they are prepared to smash unions at all costs, even when the cost hurts middle-class workers. Liberals see this as unacceptable, and we will be casting our votes in favour of middle-class workers and their families and the issue of fairness and full consultation. If we want to change the Labour Code or anything in it, then sit down with the partners and discuss those things and make the changes. My first concern with C-525 is that it proposes to fundamentally change how a union can be formed and dissolved in the federal jurisdiction, when the evidence shows there is no need and the major stakeholders have neither asked for this change or even agree with it. Despite the fact that the federal labour relations system is respected and supported by both labour and employers as a result of a genuine and proven consultative and consensus process that's been followed for decades for amending the Labour Code, but this bill clearly ignores all of that good work that's been done over the years by having discussions with labour and the employer as to what changes need to be made. It seems 525 is, again, rooted in ideology rather than sound policy based on need. There has been no proven need for this legislation. Those supporting this bill suggest that the rationale for C-525 was a mountain of complaints regarding union coercion of workers. However, according to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board, there have only been 2 founded complaints against unions out of 4,000 decisions in 10 years. So all of this is about 2 serious complaints. Even the chairperson of CIRB stated in committee testimony, this is not a huge problem. So for labour relations legislation to be effective, it must be developed and implemented by the stakeholders through pre-legislative consultation based on evidence, not by backdoor government manoeuvring of private members' bills that are again based solely on ideology. This is not the first time we've seen bills that clearly, rather than based on substance or science, they're just based on the ideology of the Conservatives. 525 ignores long-established processes and, like its sister legislation 377, imposes radical changes that are not supported by the stakeholders or by the facts. The result of this legislation will not be labour harmony or efficiency. It will be an upsetting of the balance and stability in labour relations in Canada. Now, this may be what the government is attempting to spark, but it is not in the best interest of employers, workers, nor the Canadian economy in the long term. But I'm not here just to poke holes today. In fact, as someone who has a strong union base in my own constituency, I have seen the positive contributions made to my communities by organized labour over many years. Indeed, this kind of social benevolence is something that has long underscored the labour movement in Canada, and those of us in the Liberal caucus continue to support these middle-class workers and their families very proudly. Kicking labour around is tantamount to an attack on our communities, and this government should be ashamed of the approach that they're taking. 377 was bad enough, and now 525 appears on the scene. When will it stop? This bill is neither about union democracy nor balanced labour relations. 525 fundamentally changes the way workers can unionize without any consultation or support of the stakeholders and based on zero evidence for its need. Rather than this kind of knee-jerk approach, the Liberal Party has called for a certification process. One that allows a worker to make a free and informed decision about whether they want to join a union or not. Two, that has been created through a fair and balanced consensus tripartite process that is based in fact, where the changes to be made come from the stakeholders themselves. 525 is yet another example of this Conservative government abusing the private members' bill process as backdoor government legislation to promote their ideology, not the views and the wishes of the stakeholders or their constituents that would be affected or the facts at hand that show it's not needed. What are they so afraid of? When they tried this, the very same thing with 377, their own senators admonished them for doing it. They stymied debate, curtailed committee study, and act like their fingerprints are not all over the document. So, for example, the Human Resources Committee only studied this for 2.5 hours, and almost every witness, including government witnesses, spoke out against this bill. Somehow it sounds a bit like C-23. Specifically, the witnesses that were heard expressed concern over the bill. George Smith, a labour relations expert, said, "We are dealing with a private member's bill to amend a significant section of the Canada Labour Code without any view of how this change will impact overall labour relations policy in the federal sector, without any of the necessary due process and public consultation to examine the intended and unintended consequences of such amendments." Dick Heinen, Executive Director, Christian Labour Association of Canada, a union that is often viewed as employer-friendly, said this about the current card check system: "It has worked, and I don't know what the problem is. I don't know why we need to change that." Elizabeth McPherson, Chair of the Canada Industrial Relations Board, with respect to the effectiveness of the current card check system, in our opinion, it is working well. With the board having the discretion to decide when a vote must be held, it works. So why do we need to change it? So why is the government refusing to listen? Is it anything else but clear ideology? Conservative abuse of this process has been so terrible in the past that the Conservative member for Edmonton St. Albert resigned from the caucus in disgust, and I see that they have learned nothing from the past. It has already been said that power over a person's wallet is power over their will, and that is what 525 is really all about. As just one example, research has clearly shown that moving from a card check-based system to a mandatory vote system reduces unionization rates. This is the true motivation behind the bill. 525 proposes to abolish the card check model in favor of a mandatory representation vote in all certification applications, and it's really no more complex than that. Labour unions have been defenders of employee rights, and they have a long-standing track record of helping our community in so many ways. Of course, unions are not perfect, and there have been many occasions when I have differed with them, but I do believe in due process. 525, like its sister bill 377, is a partisan attack on middle-class workers and their families. It's wrong, and as the Liberal industry critic, I will be voting for workers and against this sneaky backdoor legislation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Reprise du débat.